You'd hardly realize there was an abandoned Gothic mansion within these trees if you didn't know to look, or like us had stumbled on its unique story and decided to track it down. Before we head inside, it's important to know its history, which sets it apart from other better-known lost mansions of Scotland. Abandoned Places Scotland, the Gothic Mansion Zoo. The lands around us once belonged to the Graham family. The clan had become famous due to the acts of Sir John de Graham, a friend of William Wallace, who had rescued him at Queensberry, but was killed at the Battle of Falkirk. For the Grahams' later support of David II at the Battle of Neville's Cross, they were given the lands the mansion now stands upon. The most famous Graham clan leader was James Graham, 2nd Marquess of Montrose. He was born at a nearby ruined castle the Grahams built in 1370 that protected their lands here. James was a poet and soldier who during the English Civil War joined the Covenanters, who were in uprising against the throne due to church reforms. He fought on their side at the Battle of the Brig of Dee, but was to become disillusioned with their cause once he met King Charles I of England. He was then to be charged with intrigues against the Covenanters and his enemy, Archibald Campbell, the Marquess of Argyll, and he was thrown in Edinburgh Castle prison until he was released in a general war pardon by Charles I. In 1644, Charles appointed him Lord Lieutenant of Scotland, and he led a series of daring and skilled attacks that led to 6 major victories over larger forces of the Campbell clan and the Covenanters, where he quickly found himself in control of all of Scotland. However, just as he summoned the Scottish Parliament in Glasgow, Charles I was defeated at the Battle of Naseby, causing James to have to march south to save him. As he did so, most of his forces deserted him, and he was defeated at the Battle of Philiphaugh. James then fled Scotland and returned in 1650 to fight again on the side of Charles II, who was then living in exile after the execution of his father. This time he was defeated at the Battle of Carbisdale and dragged from Ardvret Castle and taken from there to Edinburgh to hang as a traitor. In the morning he arose and carefully made himself presentable. After facing criticism for this by Puritan priests, he stated, "My head is still my own. Tonight, when it will be yours, treat it as you please." Montrose was taken to a 30-foot-tall gallows, where he was not allowed to speak. From here he climbed the scaffold ladder, proclaiming, "God have mercy on this afflicted land." The hangman cried as he did his work, after which James's body was left hanging for 3 hours. After the body was cut down, his head was removed and kept on a spike for 11 years over a nearby gate. His body was chopped into quarters and sent to the major towns of Perth, Glasgow, Aberdeen, and Stirling for public viewing. In 1661, with the regaining of the throne by Charles II, his torso, which had been buried in a moor, was dug up and his head was taken off the spike and replaced by the Marquess of Argyll's head, and James's remains were carried to be placed in a coffin in Holyrood Cathedral. In an even stranger turn of events, James Graham's heart had previously been removed from his torso after it had been buried in unconsecrated ground. His niece had men seize it after his death, and as a relic it was kept in a case made from his own sword's blade. Later in the 1800s, the handle of the sword with engravings of James's family arms and the mummified right arm with nail holes were discovered and catalogued. It was believed to have been the arm that was hung in public view in Perth. Both the heart, arm, and sword are now missing. After James's death, the family fortunes fell sharply, but recovered under his son James, who had refused to be a juror at the trial of his father's enemy Archibald Campbell, Marquess of Argyll, and had regained the lost family lands. Yet like his father, he died at the age of just 37. His own son, also a James, in 1670, sold a portion of the family lands the mansion stands upon to a Robert Smith. From here on, the Grahams lived at another mansion you might just recall us visiting earlier. First, the Smiths built a small house upon the 10-acre plot where they lived until the late 1700s. Due to properties in the West Indies and their founding of the bookseller John Smith & Son, they became very rich. John Smith in 1812 decided to build a new family mansion in the popular Regency Gothic style on their lands. The style was a successor of Georgian architecture and the ancestor of Victorian Gothic, in use from just 1811 to 1820 and fueled by the period of prosperity after the Battle of Waterloo. It was known for its straight lines, ornamentation, and strict adherence to real historical building models. In this vein, the family created an amazing seat for their family. The house had oak panels, carved stone ceilings, stained glass windows, blue and silver silk wallpaper, and huge carved wooden doors. Outside was a massive ornamental walled garden. The house was looked at for many years with envy by other locals. However, it was in time sold to Sir Andrew Buchanan, the ambassador to the Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1851, possibly as the family overspent its new wealth. From here it was leased in 1874 to John Guthrie Smith, a historian who was of the same original Smith family. It was to switch hands again with later owners, including James Outram, an owner of the Glasgow Herald, and Harold Yarrow from the famous Yarrow and Company shipyard. He lived there until 1940. In 1949, zoologist William Wilson bought it and altered the mansion into a zoo for 4,000 animals with its own elephant named Charlie. On its first day open, it had 37,000 visitors. The nearby hill contained dens for the animals, and there was a Noah's Ark building built for the birds and smaller animals. Nearby ponds had boats for rowing and sightseeing, and Charlie lived in the nearby stables with his Indian keeper, Ibrahim, who once went for a drink at a local pub and was shadowed by Charlie, who tried to enter and became stuck, having to be freed by firemen. The tea room of the castle at one time served up to 1,000 people daily. However, despite these attractions and even 2 cigarette-smoking chimps, the zoo was a financial failure and eventually closed in 1955. Contributing factors were the mansion's remote location that required access from steep cliffside roads, 4 terrible and record-wet summers, and a number of animal attacks that included a boy being mauled by a lion and multiple children attacked by leopards that resulted in lawsuits. The last resident was Charlie the elephant, who was almost sold as dog food meat to butchers, but in the end, he was sold to a man in Yorkshire, where he lived the rest of his life, dying the same day as his Indian keeper. By the 1960s, the mansion house was slowly rotting away, and here it stands today. The portico hides amidst many small trees. Fine details are apparent on the top of it. This would have been the first thing one saw when entering the main hallway entrance. The entrance hall is now piles of mossy rubble. Behind us, the door is distinctly arched. To the side is the carved base of a column. Likely further buried under these stones is more of the ornate stonework like this fringe. We head along the outside looking for more entrances. Entire trees grow through some windows. Above, there are still corbelled turrets and decorative windowsills. This room is a great example of why in more ruinous houses like this, it's important to go very slowly, look all around, and gauge whether an area is too dangerous. These two walls and this arch is supported by a barely connected single stone. Above it, another single keystone, ready to fall, supports the upper parts. We skirt the edge for a better entrance point. This Gothic window would have framed stained glass. The building would have stood 3 stories with the addition of more in the small towers like this one. Around the back is a sunken courtyard with gaping entrances to caved-in rooms. There seems to be no way to get out of it if we go down. We decide to go inside and see if there are more entrances. With the ceiling gone, the moss and fallen stone creates the feeling of an ancient lost temple.
People obviously walk across this, but I don't think I'm going to do it. Like, I have no idea what the condition of my this is. So, self-preservation.
This square tower has lost much of its fabric and is very unstable with large cracks in the walls and a broken side turret. A fallen tree seems to have pulled part of the structure down with it.
Wow.
Heading inside from the back entrance, there are mounds of rubble that would have been the stone vaulted ceilings. The stones are so high we are almost standing on the second floor.
Did you see the fireplace over there? Up on the wall. Great. Not that long. Looks really decorated.
An intact column gives a glimpse of the ornate interiors. Beyond the first, another pillar with a hole leading to a fireplace.
much holding this ball in place. One stone.
We risk it and go under the loose keystones.
We can go right up this window.
The ceiling of the last turret is shrouded in shadows. As we leave this place, its dark tower looms behind us as the sun dips low. In 2012, the mansion was for sale, and in 2014, the town announced plans for work on the site to preserve its exterior and develop it into an activity center. Perhaps, once again, this house will be alive with visitors and sights, like of old, and be given a purpose again. For now, the mansion sits still and alone, visited only by the ghosts of its colorful past. Join us next time as we explore an ancient hilltop fortress in Ireland. Thank you for watching. For more unique abandoned places and their lost stories, follow us today by subscribing and hitting the bell icon. If you are subscribed, please take a moment to unsubscribe and resubscribe, as we understand many of you are not getting notifications for our videos. Until next time.